Welcome back to Real Estate Investing for Life. I am Jonna, and I am so excited you joined us back today. We have special guests in the studio. You know I don't do guest episodes every week, so I'm super excited to introduce these two to you. And this is a show we're doing today really about development. And I want you to stay tuned and listen, even if you don't think of yourself as a potential developer. There are so many different ways that we can learn from this conversation, learn about trends, learn about what not to do, and learn how to potentially work with developers. So with that, I'm going to welcome my special guest. We've got from Haven, Idaho, big supporters of the Idaho Real Estate Investor Network. Super happy to have Justin Ruthenbeck here he flew in for this interview. Really privileged to have him here. Very experienced developer from multiple states. And then we have his co-founder, Tanner Verhoeks.
Yep, you got that
here.
right.
And Tanner, we talk about the last name. I love it. It's a beautiful, unusual last name. Great guy right here in the Treasure Valley who is doing big things in a couple of different areas of development. So let's dig into this. I want to know, I'll start with you, Justin. How did you dip your toes into this development world, and how did you connect with Tanner? And then I'll let Tanner explain who he is.
I think the most fun story is how we connected.
Yeah.
This is back, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah, 2016.
2016. I was doing stuff in San Diego. I'm based out of San Diego. And I was working on a property, and lots of people were contacting me and asking me if they could go to lunch. Hey, can I do this? Can I do that? Most people wanted to sell me something. So I got tired of that. I was like, yeah, happy to talk with you. I'm going to be out there on Saturday morning at 7 o'clock in the morning laying pavers. You can come and work for free for me. And if you want to, we can talk.
You said bring your gloves.
Bring your gloves.
That's brilliant.
And so 10 years later, here we are in business together, doing a lot of big stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
No, it was cool.
Okay, and Tanner, what's your background?
Civil engineering. So I was kind of on the other side of the table. I was drawing plans for, subdivisions and stuff like that. At the time, young family, newly married, first kid, realized I need to think about retirement. And said, oh, real estate, I'm gonna go that direction. And went on Bigger Pockets and found Justin, and the rest is history.
And this was down in California.
Yeah, so I was born and raised down in San Diego. Moved up to Idaho in 2018. Wanted to bring the family up here, raise the kids up here.
And I don't know if we've all had that conversation because I grew up in San Diego as well.
Okay, yeah.
Although my parents and grandparents were Idahoans and my great-grandparents. So I am fourth generation, just happened to be born in that beautiful sunny seaside town.
Yeah.
I always joke, I've had 2 kids here, so I think I'm a naturalized citizen anchor baby, so.
Amen. I love that. And Justin, I didn't get into your background. What kind of background did you come from before development?
Yeah, so I came from the tech world. I graduated with a degree in computer engineering, and I went into the startup world in the early 2000s. And then later after that, had that fun experience. After that, went into big tech, worked sort of in big tech for about another 12 years after that. And then there was kind of a period in between that when I was both doing the 9-to-5 and also working in real estate, sort of growing into the real estate space. And then at some point, I just couldn't handle doing a day job and developing. And so I eventually ended up picking development.
Okay, nice. What about the tech world or tech world, but that engineering world? Do you think that was an asset coming into what you're doing today?
I think when I tell people that, they think that it's very different or that it's somehow very odd to do. But in my arc of career, I started as a programmer, just programming. And then I moved into a little bit more of the architecture, keyword, right?
Right.
And then I moved into more of the product management. And so it was still very technological. It was still dealing with frameworks and infrastructure and software design and system design and all that. But the skills that I got from that turned out to directly apply to real estate as well. Because real estate is really just doing the same thing as software development, but in the real world. And so when I was started to do real estate, it actually felt very natural, except that somebody couldn't just go and take whatever work I had and delete it and say, we're not doing that anymore. Go away, get rid of all the code. You can't just do that with a house or a building. And so it felt very different to be putting all the energy and the focus and trying to be artistic and expressive, but being able to do that in the real world with something that people really valued and they really cared about. And that really scratched an itch for me. And I just wanted to have more of that.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
It's that whole story. You're driving around town with your grandkids and look, grandpa built that. And it's still there. It's real.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was, I met people like that. One of the first subdivision project that I did was from a guy, and his grandpa had built a lot of Point Loma. And so in Point Loma, there's a lot of these houses that were built in the 60s. And that part of San Diego, it was a point of pride for him to be able to say, like, oh, my family, helped to create that. And that was 2 generations later. And it really spoke to me to just be able to, put a mark on the world that was going to last longer than I'll be around.
See, I love that. I think that developers can get a bad rap. I mean, they just can. With people, and you think of people with their picket signs like "no development" or "not in my backyard," that sort of thing. But I've known from the moment I met you guys, I could tell it's different. Your framework for how. Tell me about this. Your idea of what your envision and your part of your, I guess, your mission is related to
Sure.
Haven, Idaho.
Yeah, I mean, intentionality is at the core. One of our core tenets is leave it better than you found it. It's really taking multiple stakeholders into account, the jurisdiction, the neighbors that are already there, and then the future homeowners that are going to be there, along with all the subcontractors that are a part of it that help create it, the investors that come along for the ride. And so it's looking at the holistic impact of your project from start to finish instead of just how much money can I make here.
It's easy to look at real estate development or real estate investment in general as similar to, say, the stock market, where you take money, you put money in, some things happen, I don't want to know, more money comes out. And that's fine. But I think with real estate, because you're impacting people in the real world, you're investing money, whether it's our money or investors, or money is coming in, and that money is paying salaries to people. It is creating lasting change. It's impacting the neighbors, as Tanner said. It's helping a city with a problem, whether it's affordability or access to housing or redevelopment of blighted areas. I mean, there's a real tangible problem.
Yeah, you're creating value.
And so you can create value that's measured entirely in dollars on your personal wealth statement, or you can create value that is measured in terms of your personal wealth statement and also the impact that your money or your effort or your creativity or whatever you're bringing to the table is actually impacting in the real world.
Are there people thriving at the end of the day?
Yeah. Like if you think about it, like because of me, who cares that I was there? Who cares that I did that? Is there a named person who is now thankful that you did what you did and goes to bed thinking, oh, I'm glad those guys did that. I'm glad I met them. I'm glad I was part of that.
Yeah.
And that's just a very different feeling, a way of thinking about the purpose of investing or the purpose of how you spend your time than saying that you feel like you have to go into the office because this happens, or I'm investing and I'm trying to reach a magic number so that something can happen. If you blend purpose and finances and time, you come up with this beautiful soup. And we're trying to figure out what that soup would be and make sure that we can make more of that soup.
You know what I love about that, what you're saying in this conversation, is a lot of our listeners and viewers are folks that maybe are not the developers themselves, but they have an interest in participating in the project, or maybe being a long-term anchor tenant in a project, or, there's a lot of different, or a buyer of a project, of a unit in a project. And I think that's something that we can all buy into, especially if you're investing in a project. I totally agree. It shouldn't be someone that just like holds their nose and puts their money in. They hate it. They know it's not good for the community, but they're going to make a good return. I can tell you think differently about that. And with that lens, how do you pick a project for development? What does that look like? Because there's a lot of different things that you could choose from, I would imagine, to start on.
We were kicking around this new phrase together, and so, right, you can acquire something, you can inject value, create value, and then distribute that value. And that model, it's not, what we do is not uncommon, and I believe in how we do it is uncommon, right? And so that phrase was kind of just a framework.
When you're evaluating those things, what do you all look at, or I guess what does a good developer look at that someone that's more of a novice might miss?
I think one of the things that people maybe have a hard time grasping is just how to measure and handle risk.
Right.
So when there's an opportunity, just take a simple example. You see a listing and it's listed and in the listing it says you can build 118 units, right? It's zoned for 118 units and they have some nice renders and it shows what it is. And it's true, right? You could do that by right. Maybe the city is enabling that. The question though is at what level, what risk comes with that? And also, should you do it?
Right.
And so what we were talking about before was a little bit on the should, right? Does it make sense? Is that the thing that the world needs right now? But the other part of it is what risk comes with it. And you can measure, I don't have a magic way. I'm not aware of anybody who has a magic numeric number to measure that risk. It's one of those things where you can't. I think a lot of people come into real estate investing, especially if you don't have a familiarity with it, you want to take everything and push it into spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Because if you can push it into a spreadsheet, then you can come up with a number. And that number is like, okay, if that number is greater than 18, it's good. If it's less than 18, it's bad. And it makes it a very binary decision. But these projects that we're working on, they have nuances to them. And so we have to ultimately, when we talk to people, there's lots of investors who we have to work with as part of this. Love working with them.
Yeah.
But a lot of times they want a number. And what we really want to have is a conversation to say, this is what we see. This is what we would consider our most likely scenario. And let's say they say an 18% return. That's the most likely scenario. But it can be anything from here to here.
Right.
And these are the key drivers of what that is. And so there are key drivers on the upside, there's key drivers on the downside. And some people, they're too busy. They're like, trust you guys, go for it. And some people want to learn. And I think we're happy to have those conversations with people because it's important that they understand that two people saying the same number does not equate to the same opportunity in any way. It's a challenge because when you try to simplify something down that is actually complex and nuanced, you lose a lot of interesting pieces to it.
For due diligence, how long does that typically take you once you've identified a property? I know it's not just as simple as putting all things into a spreadsheet like you just mentioned. Yeah. How long does that normally take before you identify that you are definitely moving forward with a project?
Depends on there's a continuum of complexity of project.
Again, right? Like you try to take a big, complex, nuanced thing and take it down into a number. Very, very difficult to do. I would say maybe 3 months.
Yeah, so you can go as fast as 30 days if you're very familiar with the project type and the location and there's a track record, and it can get up to 90 days if there's something that's just more nuanced or there's trouble with the groundwater and you need to do geotechnical studies and things like that. There's very technical things that you can go do for due diligence.
Yeah, almost whenever I think about this, it takes me back to the calculus class. I don't know if you remember.
I didn't get that far, Justin.
So, when you look at math, sometimes you have equations, right? 2 plus 4 equals 6. And then you get into higher and higher level math. And that's when my head started to not comprehend it. But you start to get into graphs that move and change as a function of variables.
Right.
And so multivariable calculus, which again, I don't remember enough to say, but when you get into multivariable calculus, it becomes difficult to know exactly what's going to happen without starting to fix some variables. And so you make some assumptions about some variables, and then you can get a better sense of what's going to happen on your, with different other variables. But if you have 10 different variables and you're trying to figure out it's almost impossible to mentally grok. Yeah. So when you say the diligence, I can give you diligence in 10 minutes, but that's a diligence to n number of variables. If you give us 30 days, we can get it down to maybe the 5 key variables. If you give us 90 days, we can get it down to maybe the 2. If you give us, right? So you end up getting a continuum where the longer that you do and the more work you do, the higher the confidence that you have and the fewer breaking variables that are still out there. And that's part of the challenge, because if we're going to take a property, let's say it's an infill project in a city, that project might be gone in 3 days.
Right.
If it's wholesaler, for example. That might be gone in 3 days. And so we have to be able to do things quickly and make calls. And typically what happens is the more risk you have, the more variables you have, the lower the price, because we have to take into account for that. But if we are in a situation where we can de-risk it, then oftentimes we're able to help the seller with better pricing. So
I would imagine it's a little bit similar to when people are picking up properties potentially to flip or something, and that you always want to have a plan B and plan C. If you pick it up for the right price, you can always offload it, right? Or do something with it, and that de-risks some of it.
Yeah, you make your money on the buy, right?
Right, exactly. What do you think are some of the mistakes that you see frequently with more novice developers when they're evaluating raw land? Have you seen some? Big mistakes?
A lot of the time, they're not thinking about the market that they're going to be selling into, because sometimes these projects take 18, 24, 36 months.
Yeah.
And so you can have a great plan that works 6 months from now, but you don't know what market you're going to be selling into. And so you just kind of have to figure that out from, you can start looking at regional domestic trends and stuff like that, and track record, and start making those assumptions. Or you can know that your product is differentiated, and it doesn't really matter what's the market cycles you come into. That product is always going to be desirable, different, stand out.
That's really interesting. It's kind of like part of your underwriting, looking at how far out you might be putting this to market, I would assume.
Well, and so you have that assumption you're going to take it all the way, but then you have various exit points where you can exit sooner. And like you said, just kind of cover your downside and know if there's a plan B or C, you can get out of it at different points.
Where would you say that, I'm just out of curiosity, where would you say that we're in the market cycle right now for new development? I guess specifically speaking to Idaho right now, there's a lot of development going on, a lot of big buildings going up. Do you rate that kind of and where we are in the cycle?
I mean, I'll start and I'll let Justin finish, but you kind of think about what's happening around in Treasure Valley. Micron's a hot topic, right? They're bringing a lot of money here. I think our population's getting to a point where bigger businesses and commercial and industries are starting to look at Treasure Valley. And so you get kind of those factors driving development. Yeah, you want to add to that?
I would say I have never heard a real estate agent or a developer for that matter say that it's not looking good. So,
yeah. Well, I was just thinking about common factors that people look at when they're looking at all those factors. Not necessarily in Boise. I know you're involved in the San Diego market too. Yeah. If someone was not you and they were newer and they're looking at a market, whether they're in Kansas City or wherever, like what do you suggest that they look to kind of predict, if you will, where things are going?
All the jurisdictions around us put together comprehensive plans. They're trying to look forward in the next 30 years. What's development needed? What infrastructure projects are coming? I think there's something going through our state legislature right now. They're trying to make it easier and unlock ADUs and things like that at the state level and kind of override the local jurisdictions and stuff. So you can kind of see the trends and how legislators and codes and zoning are trying to drive and steer and tell people what they want. So just be informed on all those things.
The way I would look at it is look at what people would do if there was no regulation. So what does the market want? In the world, like for example, in San Diego, for a long time, it's just been housing. I don't care what it is. It's just housing. Just give me housing. And if you build any sort of housing, people will buy. It doesn't matter if it has parking, doesn't matter if it has views, doesn't matter if it has private space, right? That's just the way that it's been. So if people want it, forget about the regulation. If people want it, then think about doing that because there's latent demand. That's an indication that there's latent demand and the market isn't meeting it. And so if you're new and you're like, hey, people, there's a lot of visitors, there's a lot of tourism. Okay, think into the tourism market. If it's hard, if hotel rates are expensive, think about maybe the Airbnb market. If it's hard, if there's seasonal people moving out, think about what that product could be that could solve for that, right? Think about where the demand is and then go in that direction. The other thing I would mention is if you're new, I would simultaneously run towards and avoid commodity product.
Yeah.
Explain.
Exactly. Yeah. So part of the problem with commodity is that everyone is doing it and it's easy to do. And so you have to be able to compete against something.
The big dogs.
The big dogs, yeah. And you probably don't have an advantage over these regional companies or national companies that are doing the same thing.
Are you talking about like national residential builders kind of thing?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
so
regional
KB
stuff.
homes.
Yeah, so think about in the Treasure Valley scenario, think about homes that are in the 1,500 square foot range, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, new subdivisions on flat farmland.
We
Lots
know
of
our
those.
biggest,
Lots of those.
builder here.
And there are a couple companies that do that, and they do that very efficiently. And they have the marketing down, and they have the acquisition. Right? Do you really want to compete against that? Probably not.
Right.
Yeah.
But those companies cannot do a lot of things. And real estate, the thing that makes it so great for small investors and developers is that it's so inefficient. Right? There's all sorts of properties that are underutilized, are misutilized. They were built in the 60s for whatever people wanted in the 60s, and that is not what they want in 2024, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Yeah.
Right? So That redevelopment play, whether it's in the city, in town, out of town, whatever it is, but taking something that is no longer economically functional and turning it into what the market wants. And if you start on a small scale, I think that's where it makes sense for most people who are smaller but want to sort of dip their toe in real estate to start.
When you have these
That's
generational
good.
shifts, right? You have, boomers that are getting older and retiring and they're liquidating and stuff like that. And so these are the opportunities where you can go in and take properties and redevelop them and think about who you know, right? Who do you know who's getting older? I think about, we have a couple investors
Yeah.
where their parents are getting older and they can't live in their house and they need assisted living. And so the children of the parents are selling the house, taking the money, investing it, collecting interest, and that interest is now covering the assisted living.
Oh,
And so that's great,
interesting.
right?
Yeah.
And so that's a win for them. It's a win for us. That money gets to go work in development projects and their parents are taken care of and things.
And what was important to the parents there was that the inheritance was also protected.
Yeah.
So, at some point in time, that money's going to go to the kids and it leaves something for them while still providing for the parents. And that's an example of taking an asset that no longer serves the needs of the parents and turning it into a different asset that does serve the needs of the parents. And it's sort of that natural flow of money and the changing of assets. It's like redeveloping the wealth of that family into something that serves their needs.
Well, and that specific property that they sold, it was some acreage in Eagle, kind of close to where the more development density is happening. And so the person that bought that property then increased its density. So, right, they got what they wanted. And so everyone it was just a win-win-win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, that leads me to a question about the folks that are out there. Again, you may be watching and you have a parcel of land. It may be from the family. Have many instances in my family where they've sold, land. If someone's out here listening to this conversation, they have land, they think they might be able to be developed. Is there a possibility for them to participate with a developer in some way?
I would
Have you
say,
done
development is kind of on a continuum from small to large.
Right.
If you have a relatively small project, a lot of times it doesn't make sense to participate because more people is more complexity, legal issues, financial issues, and everything else. But when you start to get a little bit larger, then by default, all of the projects have partnership structures anyways. And so if there's already a partnership structure, or if there's already going to be a partnership structure, and you as an owner want to participate in that, from the perspective of a developer, why not? Now, not every developer wants to be working with homeowners and sort of have that as part of their
Yeah, it's another
life.
decision maker in the mix.
It's like getting a mystery box and not knowing what you're
Yeah.
gonna get in it, for better or for worse.
There's a lot of personalities.
Everybody has a personality and they're all beautiful, but they're not all compatible. But yeah, we have done that. We do that. I know some others that do. I also know a lot of people who don't.
Well, and there's nuances there. You got to think about it. You have a piece of land. Sure, you can sell it tomorrow to a developer, but we value that differently, right? There's a cash price now.
Yeah.
But if you go along for the ride, we can value it higher. And then you think about the tax implications. Maybe it's better for you to take some cash now and carry it into another year. And you start spreading out and start thinking about tax advantages.
Yeah.
And so there's just, all those nuances.
I know about your background, Justin, but did both of you come into this world working at other careers while you were building your development business? And is that something you would recommend? Because I can imagine someone out there that has a very big interest in delving into their first development deals,
Yeah.
but they're their family provider. They're working full time.
Yeah.
Is that possible? And do you recommend it?
It can be tough. We have different stories.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go first. My ramp was about 8 years.
8 years.
8 years, yeah.
Okay.
Before I
Sizable.
went from investing, really making a decision to invest, to actually stopping my normal job. What was different for me is that I never planned. That wasn't the goal. The goal was just to have sort of a long-term, when I turned 65, to have a plan. But the more I got into it, the more, the more you do, things get bigger, things get more complicated. I was excited by it. And ultimately I just sort of, followed my energy to where I wanted to go. But to answer the direct question, I think that everybody, this is my personal opinion, everyone's got their own. I think that everybody should have a skill that they can trade time for money.
Yeah.
And so that skill is important because that's what gives you the ability to keep going and to have the confidence to weather things when they happen. If you come into something and you don't have that backing or the ability to do that, you're not going to act confidently. You're not going to feel like you can take risk because you can't afford to take risk. So as long as there's a way to step back and solve that problem for your family, great. Or do it with money that you're not reliant on, right? If you can get to the point where you've got extra capital and that capital is not going to change your life one way or the other,
Right.
because you've got that figured out, then you can go that direction.
Gotcha.
And then mine was different. Mine was a quicker path, 3 years. I was kind of working in the industry as a civil engineer. And then instead of working as a civil engineer, I went and worked at a real estate investment company, in-house engineering. And then I made the leap pretty quickly because of the partnership I developed, right? I had a depth of confidence and knowledge because I linked myself with someone like Justin, who was already kind of paved that path before me. So I felt confident to jump in. And so, that started with being helpful, just volunteering my skills, finding a way to inject value into the equation. And for some people that might look, hey, I'll be an investor. We have an employee of ours started as an investor.
Yep.
And then he liked what we were doing and an opportunity came up. And so then he joined an employee, and then he's voiced and is on a path to one day wanting to be a general partner. So you can kind of start thinking about the continuum that way as well.
Gotcha. It sure seems like for a lot of folks, the best way to participate with the most upside is to participate more on a silent or like a limited partner kind of situation, because to do it right, I'm sure, just like to run a very successful fix and flip company, for example, you're running a business.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I can tell you take it very seriously. It is a business. And it's kind of like even with real estate agents, there is a difference between someone that runs a full-on real estate business and does it day in, day out versus the person that does a deal a year. You're not going to have the same, obviously, knowledge, but also the same contacts, the same leverage, the same relationships with the city, all of those things. I'm sure it
Or just thought capacity. We've had some
plays into it.
We've had some
Yes.
partners that have full-time jobs, and it ends up there's just a conflict of weight of people being able to participate because they have a job that's taking their attention, and so it's creative, some tension, and it's interesting. But us being full-time in it, right? You wake up thinking about this stuff every day, and then you go to sleep, and then you wake up and you think about it again, and so it is a business. You are running an operation.
And it's a long-term project. It's not a 30-day in and out deal. So
Yeah, you're committed for years.
you've got to be interested.
You're committed for years.
You're not going to make it.
I think people need to understand that real estate development. So when you say you're a developer, a lot of people don't know what that means. But think of it more like an office job than, say, flipping, where you're out swinging hammers or visiting properties or whatever it is. Like, it's more of an office job. You're signing up for 2 years, let's say, of work, and a lot of that is virtual meetings on video calls, and a lot of it is project management and Monday mornings trying to shake the tree and get stuff done. Like, it's a lot of
Managing
that.
consultants,
Yeah.
going and speaking at hearings, and then having people assume your attentions and all sorts of things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, people write newspaper articles, and you have to try to think about what your reputation is and all of that. And none of that, if you don't like doing that,
Yeah.
you shouldn't do it. It's not glamorous, I guess is my
Right.
point. A lot of people think that it's, I don't know, something different than it probably really is.
It makes me think I sold a townhouse project for a local developer, or not local, but a developer, and his project got held up for years due to a protected tree on the property. Or you could have the quote unquote spotted owl or something that pops up that's something like nobody would have known until you get halfway through this process. And it's very different than something where like, oh, you just need to make sure you've got a couple paychecks put away. It's
Yeah.
a long term. You don't want to jump off that cliff unless you're ready.
And unless you get energy from it, because it can wear on you,
Oh,
right? 2 years, if you made a decision to do something and it's not going well, or you made a wrong decision and now you're married to the thing until it gets done, and you wake up every day like, oh, I just don't want to work on that, but you have to.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that drains on you. And,
Right.
and that stops giving you the motivation that you need to do other stuff. So yeah, I mean, aligning what gives you joy and where your energy comes from with what you're doing, I think is super important.
So important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what lesson, and either of you could speak to this or both, what lesson have you learned the hard way throughout this process? Anything you can impart that would save somebody else?
It's one of our favorite topics. Real estate, you get no partial credit. You have to see it through to the end. You have to finish well. You don't want to get caught in the shiny object syndrome, and you get energy from starting new things, and you take your eye off the ball of something else, and it can fall apart at the end. And then you don't get 90% of the value. Sometimes you get 30% of the value, or you just paid to work for 2 years. That's probably just a constant reminder. We remind each other, hey, we're slow growing hardwoods. There's no partial credit, progress over perfection, things like that. And then just align yourself with people that you want to be working with every day. Like Justin said, you want to wake up and be excited to go to work. And then just be careful who you partner with. Some people can talk well and wave their hands and stuff like that, but there needs to be substance. And what happens when you're in the trenches and something goes sideways? Does everyone have the staying power? Are they going to stick around, or are they going to bail? So those kind of things, just kind of vet those things early, and then have opportunities if you have other partners. You give people you trust but verify. And so if something's starting to go off the rails, have a mechanism to step in and fix that before you get too far off course.
Really good advice.
Yeah.
Sure.
I would say along the finance. So when you're investing in, I don't know, the stock market, or you're lending money, it's very simple. It's just simple.
Good returns.
When you start developing and you start thinking about capital stacks and different positions of money, I think understanding how money works in a finance, like if you go and get a finance degree, whether it's, in the real world or in an academic world, but understanding what the net present value of an asset is, like what does that mean? How do you value a future cash flow? What is time? When you think about returns and you think about how that's weighted against time, what does that mean? Can you train your brain to think about money in terms of how money works? Most people simplify it down, which is fine, but the nuances of that money becomes much more important when it's a long term and the sums are larger. I would say that we are almost as much in the business of finance as we are in the business of real estate.
Sure.
Okay.
Because the money that's required to do these projects is so big, and we are trying to, just like a bank, right? Big amounts of money. The margins are not actually that large, but you need to measure risk and protect risk and make sure that you don't lose money along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to think about how other people are feeling about their money, so that when you're working on a project, all of the stakeholders who are involved feel like they're getting what they need.
That makes a lot of sense. I know one thing that I've observed just being in the investor space is sometimes I'll see potential developers, or emerging developers, I should say, that are so stressed about the raising capital piece that they're so focused on that. I've worried about, well, are they focused on the ball, right? Like the actual project, because it's all about securing the funding, but it's all tied together, because the smart investor isn't going to invest unless that deal is secure.
Well, I mean, yeah, said another way, if you have a good project and you know how to communicate that you have a good project and show that, the money will show up.
Right.
There's lots of people out there constantly looking for good sponsors and operators to back them with money, right?
So I remember earlier in my career when people would say things like that, how angry I would get at them, because I was like, no, the money is not just showing up. It's not just going to show up on my doorstep. I have to somehow find it. But
now it is kind of.
Well, the skill that I didn't have at that time was I didn't know how to tell the story of the project. I didn't know how to represent it using the language that somebody needed to hear or that was customary in the finance world. But once I got that knowledge, then yes, it is a lot easier to raise capital.
Cool. As we get close to wrapping up here, what is something that someone can do in the next 90 days to think more like a developer?
I got one.
Go ahead.
Something everybody can do, doesn't cost a thing. Go to one planning and zoning meeting. They're going to be on a Tuesday or a Wednesday night, and just go and watch. And if you want extra credit, actually read the applicant's application before you go to the meeting. So try to understand what their application says and what they're trying to achieve. and, understand the language, use AI if you need to try to explain it to you or whatever it is. But just go and try to think like, what is this person trying to achieve? Why are they doing this? How are they presenting the story? And what sort of opposition is there going to be? And you'll start, I think, to understand the steps involved and all the work that they had to do to get there, but also then the risk that they're taking on. And they'll lay out in a lot of detail what they're trying to achieve, what it'll look like, what the schematics look like, everything. Yeah. And you'll walk away from that and a city council meeting or a county commissioner meeting where they actually approve the things. You'll walk away with a pretty good idea of the key part of what development does on the larger discretionary side of things.
I mean, do you want to touch on the fact, so someone can be a general contractor and someone can be a builder. A general contractor is hiring a bunch of subcontractors, and maybe their designer puts together plans, and they're just a facilitator, right? They have a clipboard and a dog and a truck and a phone, right?
Gotta have the dog.
What kind of dog? I don't know.
Border Collie is my favorite. Okay.
So just like a general contractor is not always a builder,
right?
Think about someone who takes a piece of land and puts some houses on it or does something. They're not always a developer. And so there's so many nuances to, you have to consider the highest and best use of the property, and you have to think about the product that's going to get absorbed by the market, and then you have to be able to manage engineers and architects, and then you have to think about capital and talk to banks, and then you got to tell the story and market it. And so a developer is really, you have to be good at a lot of things.
Very, very smart. As people are listening and they have additional questions, or who knows, maybe they've got a plot of land or something, what's the best way for folks to get in touch with you?
So for us, you could reach us at havenidaho.com. You can always hit us on email at team@havenidaho. We'll see that and we can reach out. If you're in a place where we're not, or for whatever reason you want to do it on your own, get involved in your local REIN. There's always going to be other developers. What we do, we have a certain flavor of the way we do things, not compatible with everyone. The way we think about returns, the way we think about sharing them with the community, the types of projects that we work on, not always compatible. We love talking to people. Developing is kind of a lonely game because you're out there and you're just, hey, how can we just talk to other people who care about what's happening? So, we would love to just sit and have a beer or glass of water or tea with someone else if they just want to just shoot across ideas, brainstorm things. And of course, if it works out and we jive and stuff, happy to dive in on projects together. Every project we do has partners in it. And so we're always looking for partners. But there's also a lot of great people out there all over the place. Just find somebody that is aligned with you. Find somebody that you feel like you want to be around, because if you start developing something together, you're going to be around each other quite a bit.
Years.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's a relationship.
And then just remember, right, we all can go further together, right, than we can alone.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's a team sport.
For sure.
I love it. Well, guys, thank you so much, both of you, Justin and Tanner, for being here, shedding light on this whole new world that I'm learning about alongside everyone else today. I had a lot of periphery experience for it, but I haven't delved into your shoes, and it was really enlightening. I appreciate it. And guys, thank you so much for being part of our world, listening to the show, watching the show. I appreciate it. If you like, subscribe, all the things, and share this episode with others that might be interested in the development world. Go and grow and have an amazing day.